I was standing in the freezer aisle with my breath fogging the air and my phone warm against my ear, while pallet jacks whined in reverse and the overhead fluorescents hummed like they were thinking. The warehouse night manager, a soft-spoken guy named Hector, had just told me the condenser on Bay 14 was failing and the backup was acting stubborn. Outside, wind pushed a ribbon of litter down the asphalt like a cheap parade. Inside, a stack of boxes labeled blueberries leaned a little too far left, and somewhere a radio whispered an old soul song that made the metal shelves feel kinder than they looked. I could have called our chief of operations. I could have called any number of people paid to stop that exact problem. I slid the phone into my pocket instead and walked to the valve myself, fingers going numb through thin gloves. The bolt would not give. The wrench bit my palm, reopened the old crescent scar, and the sting focused me like a clean bell. Drips softened to a shy tick. His fell to a hush. In the warped steel of a door, I caught the reflection I never quite get used to. A man with too much money, sleep creases like careful handwriting, and a stubbornness that wealth never sanded down. That small victory, there in the manufactured winter, reminded me why I started, and why I still do not trust dashboards that do not smell like Freon and wet cardboard. My name is Nathan Cole. I grew up in a one-story house set back from a road that kept its heat in summer and threw its ice like a habit in winter. My mother was a night shift nurse who blessed the coffee pot and hummed hymns she did not quite believe in. My father was a mechanic with a laugh like a loose bolt in a hubcap. Our city kept its secrets in shuttered factories and the jars of change on kitchen counters. You could taste iron in the rain and hear trains in your sleep, not as romance, but as repetition. On Saturdays, my father took me to the county auction where trucks coughed awake at dawn and men in denim traced dents with merciful fingers. He would hand me a spiral notebook and say, "Write what people ignore." So I learned to watch hands before mouths and to listen for the breath before the lie. School fit me the way a borrowed jacket hangs. I liked numbers that behaved and machines that could be convinced. I built a birdhouse with a lopsided roof and told my shop teacher it was a study in accepting gravity. He grinned like a man who had sparred with smarter lies. After classes, I worked at Kingsley's Deli where vinegar lived in the air and the slicer sang a thin metal song. Mrs. Kingsley counted change like a drummer and remembered every customer's ordinary miracle. Extra pickle for Ruth, light mustard for Arthur, rye instead of wheat when the day had gone wrong. Loyalty tastes like remembering, she told me, and I wrote that down. The first line of code I wrote was in a public library that smelled like lemon cleaner and hope. The computers wheezed if you opened too many windows, so you learned restraint without being taught manners. I printed a tutorial and used the back of those pages to sketch delivery routes like a general plotting a quiet war. Kingsley's produce man showed up whenever the day pushed him, and the lettuce arrived as if the road had asked too many questions. I built a crude script that nudged him toward green lights and fewer construction zones. It worked just enough to matter. The lettuce had more spine. Mrs. Kingsley paid me in cash, sandwiches, and introductions, which are the gold bars of small neighborhoods. I met Ben at a loading dock while a forklift coughed like a smoker determined to quit tomorrow. He was a former driver with a freight ship tattoo that made everything else on his body look temporary. We turned my library project into a product in a decommissioned nail salon where the light came through pink glass and painted our screens with a permanent sunset. The landlord, a retired piano teacher named Mr. Whitaker, let us pay month to month, which is the nicest way anyone has ever told me they did not trust me yet. He also loaned us his kettle and unrequested advice. "Money is a lease on worry," he said, and when I laughed he did not. We named the thing right away, because names are prayers, and because we did not yet know that brand consultants bill more for less. Early customers were corner grocers, diners that smelled like butter and regret, florists who lived by mornings and broke by evenings. We did not sell them a future. We sold them an extra hour of certainty. Logistics hides its hunger in the last stretch. The last mile eats patience and money the way fire eats paper. We used weather feeds, traffic sensors, and, when those failed, a 3-ring binder bin called God, full of notes about school dismissals, habitual lane closures, and the way sunlight slows certain intersections in late afternoon. We were not impressive. We were local and obsessive, which sometimes rhymes with impressive if you stick around. Claire appeared first as a favor and then as a habit. She was an accountant with plain sweaters, bright questions, and the ability to make a spreadsheet feel like a conscience. She circled clauses in early contracts with a red pen that made my stomach drop and my gratitude rise. Cash flow is not a metaphor, she said. Growth is a jealous god. When I wanted to take a risky loan, she lifted one eyebrow and asked whether I had eaten. She set water in front of me when I spoke too fast, as if hydration could slow a man down. Truckers trust truckers more than they trust software, so we built a small app that looked like a friend's advice and not a command. It told drivers where to stop for coffee, where the bathrooms were reliably clean, which sounds trivial until you respect that human bodies are the secret constraint of every schedule. Drivers loved it. They recommended it to other drivers out of the ordinary generosity of people who spend long days in the geography of alone. We did not charge for the bathroom map. We charged for the windows that map made possible. Precise receiving slots we confirmed by actually calling and asking. Our little kindness earned us big punctuality. The first time we almost drowned, it was not a betrayal or a storm. It was a quiet bug. A junior engineer merged a patch that shifted time windows by the width of a yawn. Phones lit. Refrigerators filled with the wrong things at the wrong temperature. And the sound a manager makes when you have wasted her dawn feels like a door closing you do not deserve to be behind. We pulled everyone into the salon that now held whiteboards instead of nail polish, traced causality like detectives with yarn, and rolled back with the caution of surgeons. When the fix held, I did not cheer. I stepped out into drizzle and called my father. Get in front of it, he said. Call every person who matters before they call you. Say what you did and what you did about it. I called. Some yelled. Some sighed. One grocer named Lena said, "Screw-ups tell you what a company really is," and kept us. We wrote a ritual after that. No one ships alone. A spotter stands behind every ladder. I keep a pocket full of facts the way some people keep lucky coins. 1. The first barcode scan in a supermarket rang up a pack of gum in an Ohio store in the mid-1970s. Not with fanfare, but with the small beep that would teach the world to trust beeps. 2. Standardized shipping containers did not win because metal boxes are glamorous. They won because they turned chaos into corners in the late 1950s and made the ocean sensible. 3. Cold chains are not just for ice cream and vaccines. They protect dignity by making breakfast predictable. I taped those truths near my monitor like saints. Investors arrived with tidy shirts and tidy skepticism. Forecasts are their poetry. Patience is their accent. I learned to speak their language without letting it rewrite my vows. Ben hired dispatchers who still owned their old trucker jackets and wore them like diplomas. Claire built a finance team that loved mornings, which is when honest money work likes to happen. When we finally left the salon, Mr. Whitaker played a wobbling blessing on his upright piano, hands trembling, melody brave. I felt consecrated in a way a ribbon-cutting never managed. Success is a porch light that collects moths. A competitor founder named Daniel invited me to dinner at a place where napkins smelled faintly like starch and the tables were too heavy to move. He said consolidation was inevitable and resistance was a style choice. Sell now, he urged, before the grind gets into your bones. I changed the subject to football and watched him leave in a black car that seemed to swallow reflections. On the sidewalk, I felt the quiet thrill of keeping my story mine a little longer. Maya joined with a streak of white in her hair like a comet and the talent of hearing the request living under the request. We sat in a bodega back room with a shop owner named Javier who insisted our windows were too tight. My cousin borrows the cart, he said, gesturing with a plastic fork. He is not punctual in the way your software is punctual. Maya asked, what would punctual feel like to you? Javier laughed and drew a square on a napkin. He wanted grace built into the box. She built it. Usage spiked. The napkin out-argued our slide deck. There were women who lit parts of the path, and sometimes parts of me. Elena painted until birdsong, brewed teas that smelled like cut grass, and taught me the difference between silence and quiet. Silence can be a void. Quiet has texture. We lasted until calendars refused a truce. Later there was June, a barista whose jokes arrived before the milk frothed. She liked that I called my mother on Sundays and did not like the way my phone hummed through dinner. We ended with kindness and the kind of fatigue that prefaces any wise goodbye. They were never the point of the story, but they were punctuation that made the sentences honest. Then the world coughed. and the sound took months to fade. Supply chains buckled. Shelves spoke emptiness. A pandemic taught even toddlers the grammar of absence. We turned our conference room into a crisis hub and our kitchen into a staging area for masks and sanitizer. Grocery margins are thin, a whisper above break even, and the people who feed cities do it with courage braided to math. We extended terms for small customers who deserved a chance to live. Claire built spreadsheets that showed exactly how close we were to stupid. I phoned bigger partners and asked for grace using every word my mother gifted me for dignity. That spring the city let you hear your own thoughts. Noise dropped to a civic whisper. On roofs, birds sounded like a new species when in truth, they were simply amplified. Ben and I took turns driving a van when carriers fell ill. At dawn, inside a mask that turned my breath into weather I did not control, I rolled a dolly into a store where the owner's eyes above his mask went wet. "You showed up," he said, voice catoned. Every promise in business is a version of those words. We made it through by stubbornness, luck, and the favors we had banked as ordinary decency. When the world exhaled, we were not bigger so much as denser. Our systems had learned to flex. Our maps had learned to listen. Maya's team added a gentle tool that lets store managers plan labor around reliable arrivals. It was not glamorous. It kept families fed. Somewhere along the way, people started using the word billionaire near my name, as if money chooses quiet rooms. I learned to be a steward without pretending the thing itself is not delicious. I bought my father a restored pickup that looked autobiographical and my mother a chair that hugged her and stood her up. For myself, I bought time. Unglamorous hours to sit near compressors and talk to people who speak with their hands. We went public on a day that would have made my guidance counselor proud and vaguely confused. The bell rang. Applause sounded like rain on a car roof. I looked at a thin steel ring on my finger, made from a bolt we pulled from our first rickety shelf. After the noise, I slipped into a hallway where a security guard ate a sandwich with church-like respect. "Big day," he asked. "A day," I said. He nodded like a man who knows satisfaction does not report to commas. Not long after, a ransomware crew tested whether our rehearsals were theater or religion. Screens went dark like a neighborhood blackout. We shut what needed shutting, lit what needed lighting, and rolled out the paper manifests I had kept like a superstition. Engineers slept on yoga mats. Drivers carried clipboards that smelled like toner. At 3 a.m, I walked the aisles with a flashlight, greeting pallets of onions like cattle in a barn. When we were clear, I wrote a terse note to the people who tried to rent space in my head and then refused them further lease. People passed through and left fingerprints that never washed away. Marcus ran our Newark yard like a benevolent dictator, able to diagnose a forklift by listening to its cough. Olivia rewrote contracts into English and called that radical. Sarah tuned warehouse playlists to keep people awake without stealing their calm. Ethan started as a temp, then quietly invented a stacking pattern that kept odd boxes from bruising one another. We said thank you in the currency each person preferred: money, weekends, a laptop that stayed closed without guilt. A journalist once asked me to describe our romance with the market. Markets flirt. They love novelty and punish shyness. Try to sleep with a market and you wake up lonely. My romance is with the ordinary. A receiving clerk's neat cursive on a crowded manifest. The steady hush when everything moves as designed. A driver's relief when a bathroom is cleaned precisely where we promised. If there is a core idea that made money inevitable and meaning possible, it is this. Predictability is love in a business suit. Show up when you say you will, and people will forgive you almost anything that is honest. Some nights I sit with more facts in my pocket like smooth stones. The early internet switched to a common tongue in a winter flag day in the early 1980s, as if the planet agreed to speak softly together. In dense neighborhoods, a constellation of small bodegas can shift a zip code's health more than a billboard, because feet vote truer than surveys. In refrigerated rooms, you can smell when a compressor is planning a betrayal. It is a sour metal note, faint, like a rumor. Facts like that keep me humble enough to ask better questions. I have had meetings where someone called me sir in a way that meant rich and not respected. I have had lunches where the waiter caught my eye and gave me the smile people give someone who looks tired enough to be real. Once, at a ribbon cutting, Ben stepped aside so a janitor could pass with a mop as if the man with the bucket were the dignitary. He would deny it, but I saw it. That is the company we built. Back in the freezer aisle with Hector, after the hiss surrendered and the drip learned its manners, I leaned into the cold and let fatigue press my eyelids. My phone buzzed. "Claire, please tell me you are not wearing a parka in an industrial refrigerator," she said, voice dry as flour. "I am wearing a parka in an industrial refrigerator," I said. Small silence. "The warm kind. I left stew on your porch," she said. "Eat before sunrise." I promised. I walked past pallets shrink-wrapped like cautious gifts, through the door where the wind had decided to rest. Driving home, I passed a mural of a container ship on a bright painted ocean, boxes stacked like careful thoughts, a tiny person on deck lifting a hand. I remembered that a metal box changed the world by finally agreeing on a size. I thought about our maps and binders, our kindly bathroom app, our people who watch clocks the way others watch sunsets. My father's laugh, my mother's hands, Elena's definition of quiet, June's early jokes. At a red light, a kid on a bicycle peered in and tilted his head like he recognized something. Maybe he saw a man in a warm coat who had chosen this way of being tired. At home, I warmed the stew and ate leaning against the counter because chairs felt ceremonial. Time filled the air, and something homey I could not name. I sat on the floor with my back to the oven and let my mind wander toward places that worry less. Money will buy many mercies. It will not bless your sleep. What blesses my sleep are lists with lines through them, a text from a night manager that says we handled it, the memory of a bolt yielding under a stubborn wrench. Before bed, I wrote a note. Check Bay 14 in the morning. By the time the kettle clicked off, I had stopped thinking about the exact words and started thinking about the people who would read them with first coffee, and peace settled like light snow on a fence. People want me to say what comes next, to turn unknown into comfort. Tomorrow I will spend the quiet hour before sunrise walking through the small things that want attention. I will call my mother so her day begins with a voice that once asked too many questions. I will visit Mr. Whitaker and listen to his right hand stumble lovingly over old piano keys. I will stand in a warehouse and breathe in the honest smell of refrigeration and cardboard and Diesel's ghost. I will keep a chair for doubt, because doubt keeps arrogance from setting up a tent, and arrogance ruins reality. What I want is simple and meticulous. I want a chef with a small restaurant to trust our schedule the way people trust a friend's knock at the door. I want to expand the quiet competence of our network so a grocer in a new city opens a crate and finds exactly what she expected, not because we were lucky, but because we rehearsed. I want our maps to learn new seasons, and our people to feel their work is a craft worth handing down. When some kid walks into a library that smells like lemon cleaner and hope, I want him to find a terminal that hums a little faster, a tutorial that opens without complaint, and a chair that does not wobble. There will be more bolts that refuse, storms with names and storms without, offers from men with tired eyes who fold cloth napkins into arguments, and women whose names I say with respect and whose choices I do not try to contain. There will be late nights shaped like early mornings, and early mornings that feel like a reward for staying kind. If I am lucky, there will be more radios whispering old soul songs somewhere in the racks, and more ordinary people keeping quiet promises until the world rights itself for another day.